that your purpose of your company, especially as an entrepreneur, has to overlap with your purpose as an individual. A lot of entrepreneurs will do a business and then say, well, once I succeed, then I'll give money to a charity. And what that means is that you've divided your activity, if you will, into two. There's the day job and there's the side hustle. And your side hustle is what you're passionate about. I want to be able to give money to this charity or to a church or whatever it is. And I don't care how I get the money, but that's what counts, is giving money to the church. But there's a gap, and that gap is costly.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Leadership Stack Podcast, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs to increase your leadership, teamwork, and profits. This is your host, Sean C., aka Mr. CEO at 22.
Life is short. So make sure you're doing things that bring back energy. And that's what the wonderful thing is of doing something that's purposeful, is that as much as you're expending energy to do it, the fact that you know why you're doing it brings you back energy. And that's the glory of it, to get through all the shit and the challenges of the hardships of entrepreneurship.
Once you figure out that why, so in my case, why I want to do that is I want to influence so many people towards God's kingdom. That's really why I want to write a lot of books. It doesn't have to be 100, but once you figure out that why as an entrepreneur, now you have so I handle 50 people in the team, millennials and centennials. I'm 32, turning 33. I'm a millennial. And for some reason, my organization attracts people younger than I am. That's 30 all the way to 20 years old. We have 50 of them. There's 50 of us, sorry. And how do you cascade that purpose to all of them? So there's the leadership, executive levels, managerial, and then there's the grassroots, probationaries. How do you cascade it in a way that it's going to make meaning to them? They're going to buy into that why.
That your purpose of your company, especially as an entrepreneur, has to overlap with your purpose as an individual. A lot of entrepreneurs will do a business and then say, well, once I succeed, then I'll give money to a charity. And what that means is that you've divided your activity, if you will, into two. There's the day job and there's the side hustle. And your side hustle is what you're passionate about. I want to be able to give money to this charity or to a church or whatever it is. And I don't care how I get the money, but that's what counts, is giving money to the church. But there's a gap, and that gap is costly. And it leads to things like dissension, entropy, and actually disease, because you are working two different, perhaps asynchronous, if not contestable, activities. So the key point is having that personal overlap with what you're doing professionally. It doesn't have to be 100% overlap, but having at least a strong indication and a personal story that you have as to why that links. So then once you have that becomes a strong purpose. And then when you want to go down into your teams, well, you need to be open about that. And that becomes part of the recruitment pitch. Not that they need to have your personal purpose, but they need to buy into it and they need to connect into it at their level. And so you can't be searching for the exact replica of you in mini-me's throughout the organization. By the way, that's a bad idea anyway, because you need to have diversity of mind, diversity of talents and all this. But just making them aware of what your purpose is, and then making that part of the recruitment, and then little by little modeling how you did it, how they can find their way into it. So that might mean helping them out occasionally, talking about how does this connect in with you, and talking through, like in a town hall, ask them the question, how does this purpose resonate for you? And have people sharing it. Of course, as long as you're not judgmental in that, because you're the CEO, it can be very quickly, I better not say something that's going to get him wrong. Showing the openness to accept other people's journey, other people's ways of connecting in. This is how I think at your scale you can do it. I mean, this is how I was doing it when I was running a big company. And by the way, it's never perfect. There are always constraints, and depending on the governance model that you put in place and who owns you, because you can be an entrepreneur and have a VC backing you. And when you start talking purpose to VC, you might get some eye rolling.
We're being tactical with a purpose statement and how you mentioned that you have to model it to your people. You have to talk with them about it, ask questions, be open, have that circle of safety, and be accepting on other people's ideas. How do you now communicate that same purpose to the rest of the world? That people buy stuff because of why you exist and what you represent, not just because you're one of the biggest and best manufacturers of smartphone, but they resonate with think different with Apple. That's how Apple did it. But for a startup entrepreneur, maybe still struggling with all of the juggling that you have to do, how do you plan on communicating that purpose statement to the rest of the world?
So the key point for me is having spent the time to figure out what is your purpose. Until you've actually done a deep level of analysis and thought through what your personal purpose is, it will come out a little bit wonky when you try to say, this is what I believe, because you're lightweight. You haven't really thought through, and it'll end up feeling a little bit, eye rolly, right, whatever. You don't want that. So the key thought is to have a depth to your thinking through why this purpose is your real purpose, not just a nice to have, not just some charity I want to give money to just because, oh yeah, I like it, but going at a deeper level. Then afterwards, like you were saying, you need to do the finances, you need to do the HR, you need to do, all this other stuff. Don't put the purpose in front and sacrifice the rest, because you've got to have a great product and service. Without that, you won't exist. So you need to have that, just like you also will need to have a brand. So at some level, I tend to want to say, you will find it when you are ready for it, to the extent that you are ready to do the work and you're ready to carve out the time, maybe on your weekend, a couple of hours before your kids get up, and write down on a piece of paper, what is my north? What are my 3 key values? How are those going to be exhibitable, demonstrable on a day-to-day basis, those values? Then I look at the south, which is what are the things that are stopping me from getting to my north and the limiting beliefs that I have? And then I think about the action plan. So I write about this in my new book. It's a whole process, and it takes time. And until you've done that, the chances are it'll come off a little bit mild and meek when you're trying to express it to the rest of your team. Afterwards, if you've got it and you really feel strongly about it, and then this is my business that's going to help me get to this north, I'd rather show it in different ways. So you need to act it rather than just speaking about it all the time, because it's much better to have other people say what you do rather than just say what you want. Catch me? So in this thing, you need to model the behavior, you need to be showing it, and other people say, oh God, he really knows what he's talking about. Then they will share the love. Afterwards, tactically speaking, storytelling, regularly going through, the reason why I came to this purpose is this. And, I could do the exact same thing for you, Sean, about my purpose. So I can tell you the exact path that I went through. And I do it regularly, and I've written it in my book, and I hammer it out. And if I were with my team, of course, I wouldn't do it if it's the same team week after week, but systematically with recruitments, come out with other portions of your life that link in, because it's not necessarily just one story. You might have multiple versions of it, and you can share that. And sharing that shows your personality, who you are, not just like hardcore executive, get the numbers in, bringing your vulnerability into it. And then people are going to connect into that in your team. And then they're slowly but surely, won't do it overnight, slowly but surely, hey, Sean, the other week you told me about your story. Can I tell you my story? And then you have to be able to switch off and say, yes, I'm ready to hear your story. So you have to park this, 25-minute call you have with the banker about to come up and all that kind of stuff to be able to listen in to whoever comes to tell you about their story.
Actually, I would love to hear your story. That is something that we haven't been able to do, actually. And I would love to hear that. But it's really up to you if you want to share that now or next time. But, purpose is something that is so elusive. So you're a coach, you're a speaker, and you work with a lot of companies, I'm sure. I want to know how many companies miss this out. And when they do, what are the things that are not so desirable that happens within that company?
So the big companies, majority of them lose track of their purpose. And if you think as an entrepreneur you have a lot to do, well, actually, it's the same for anybody working in a large company. They feel like they're overwhelmed with many things to do, even though all they're doing is counting tax, or whatever, small little activities, but they are busy up to the hilt. They have other pressures and stresses that are taking them away from other things. And when you get to be a leader in a large company, all these other things come in spades, where you have big meetings with important people, and everything seems to be oh so critical and short-term stressful, that the other stuff, well, I'll do that later. And so very quickly most companies fall off the path, if you will. Most companies, of course, did begin with something where there was a nice intention. There may have been a legitimate purpose in the very beginning, whether or not that was intentional or eventually developed. But so many companies, because of two problems, time pressure and stress to perform, it becomes like a back burner. And especially if within your governance model, the people who own you don't give a toss about this whole purpose idea. End of month, that's what counts. Share price, that's what counts. Or whatever the driver is. There are different types of governances, but that really drives out and squeezes out this notion of purpose. So unless, there are big companies like Patagonia, I would say to another degree, even Apple, where the founder's blood is still within the organization. And that's a personal version of blood. I mean, Jobs left such an imprint. And when he wasn't there, Apple fell apart. When he was there, Apple grew. I mean, not the first time, but the second time for sure. And his sense of total commitment, he may have been something of a hard person to deal with, but his blood is in the DNA of the company. And still, there's still people who worked with him who are now running the company. But as the company gets older, you then hire in another really smart CEO because that person's done a great job somewhere else. And the dislocation, the distance between the original purpose and how it goes down, well, the shareholder will have his word on that. And that tends to trump this notion of purpose. So purpose in big business is very rare to have. I had the privilege, Sean, of working on a company that not only had an amazing purpose, but something that really resonated within me to fit with my personal purpose. And for having done that, Sean, as opposed to someone who's writing about it or talking about it, it really drives me. It's a part of my motor. The fact that I actually lived it, I can feel it. I know how powerful it is. I know how difficult it can be because you can't do it perfectly every day, God knows, and how to live with that imperfection and manage the narratives. And you're always going to get criticisms. Not everyone's going to love you, and dealing with those and the little stories in your mind. And how do you keep that above the wave? You don't get crushed by the wave. And so that's the whole journey that I took. I mean, certainly I'd be happy to share with you more specifically how I went through it.
If you don't protect the brand, it's going to have a bad reputation. And the sprint will be just that. It's just a sprint, and then you're tired and you can't run anymore. So the business will lose momentum, it will lose profits long term. And for me, kasi if you're gonna do business, it's a marathon, long term siya. Doing it as a sprint, parang medyo hindi worth it.